Hi everyone, so in this video I review how to get research experience as an undergraduate in the social sciences. So before you consider getting research experience as an undergraduate, one thing to consider are the different fields you could go into in psychology. So in psychology, you can go into various areas. From working with students for several years, I've learned that this includes applied behavioral analysis, this includes human factors, and consumer research, right? Most people come into psychology thinking, I want to go and work with people, I want to be a therapist, and that does happen. But to continue into that field, you need more experience, you need a graduate degree, right? With a bachelor's degree, you can't be a therapist, you can't do therapy on your own. But with a bachelor's, you can work in human factors, you can work in consumer research, and you could work in applied behavioral analysis. Now, for applied behavioral analysis, you can work in that field with little to no experience. Actually, no experience. Most of my students will get hired for these positions without even a degree, right? Without a bachelor's degree, you will get hired. So if you're interested in this field, if you're interested in working with children, this is a good field to go into. Whereas students who want to go into human factors and consumer research, that field does require having research experience, right? So how do you go into that? How do you get that research experience? Whereas if you're thinking about therapy, a more applied field, applied means you want to work with people. If you're thinking of that, then really what you want to do is get experience when you're working with people, and research, while it might be a benefit to you, right? Because it doesn't hurt to have that experience because you gain several skills from working in a lab, you get leadership skills, you get experience with presenting. Really what they're looking for is, can you work with people? Right, so think about what your career focus is. If you're thinking about going into a more applied field, focus on getting experience working with individuals, such as volunteering at a nonprofit that focuses on mental health issues. Or if you're thinking about doing therapy with children, focus on working in schools, getting volunteer experience at schools, or working in applied behavioral analysis, where most likely you will be working with children, right? So keep that in mind. So for those of you who are thinking about research, you really want to think about why you're doing it. Somebody might have given you advice to pursue research, get in a lab, and they didn't really tell you why. You're not really clear, you feel you have to do it. No, you want to take a step back and think about why you're doing this, right? The first reason that I could think of, you want a good letter of recommendation. And oftentimes you will get that if you do well in the lab. Now, if you're not invested in the lab, if you don't have the time for the lab, then you're not going to do as well, you're not going to leave a good impression, you might not get the best letter of recommendation. 2, you need research experience to get into grad school or to get a job right after undergraduate, right? So this is how you get that experience before applying to jobs. This gives you an opportunity to apply to jobs in human factors and research-focused jobs, right? Such as consumer research. So you really want to think about, why is it that I'm interested in pursuing research? Is it just because it's something I think I should be doing? But if you're interested in therapy, is there other type of experience you should be prioritizing? I'm not saying don't do research, because it might be very related, right? If you're doing clinical research, it might be very related to being a therapist, and it might make you more competitive. But if you haven't had experience working with people yet, then look at that and prioritize that. So now let's look into, well, how do I get into a lab? So what does it mean to be involved in the research lab? So as a lab member, as an undergraduate lab member, most likely you'll be doing the work that no one else wants to do. Right now, this depends from lab to lab. It depends on the size of the lab. It depends on whether you're at a teaching focused institution or a research focused institution. It's going to vary, right? So it depends on that. But most likely, you're going to be doing the work that nobody else wants to do. In the social sciences, this might include transcribing, or what we call coding, looking through data and looking for patterns. It might include cleaning data, meaning looking through the data and deleting extra spaces, organizing files. So doing these things that people don't want to do, but you kind of have to think about it in terms of the long-term the long-term gains, right? So in the long term, hopefully, you'll gain some conference experience. You'll get an opportunity to present at a conference. Hopefully, you'll get a good letter of recommendation, right? So you want to leave a good impression. Now, being involved in a lab is in a very, again, from lab to lab, from department to department, from field to field, but you kind of have to come in with that mindset. I get some students who come in thinking they're going to publish a paper. Well, I have heard of that happening. That shouldn't be your goal, right? If that happens, if that opportunity presents itself, go for it. But don't feel deflated. Don't feel like your time is being wasted if you don't get that experience. In PhD programs, the PhD program I got into, PhD programs in very prestigious universities, most people that get into those programs don't have publications. So don't think that you won't get into grad school just because you don't have a publication, right? You want to think about the experience, the skills, that letter of recommendation, that relationship you're forming with your colleagues in that lab, including the grad students that will help you along the line. You're also taking this time to really explore what are your interests. So even if this, you thought you were interested, it ends up not being your interest, that's still a valuable experience. Then you know, okay, let me look into other fields. Maybe I'm interested in developmental psychology, and initially I thought I was interested in social psychology, right? So this lab is time for you to get experience, time for you to make connections, get that good letter recommendation, get conference experience, and then hopefully, figure out what you want to do in this field. Figure out, do you want to go into research, or are you more interested in some other field? So the thing about working in a lab is that oftentimes you have to volunteer your time. So you're not getting paid most of the time, especially in state schools, especially in community colleges. The thing about that is, well, what if you're working? What if you have a full class schedule on top of that? What if you're commuting? How do you make time for this? And really, it's going to take some sacrifice, right? I had to do that. I've seen my students do that, where they have to volunteer their time in a lab on top of working full time, on top of taking a full course load, on top of having family responsibilities. And it is a difficult thing to do, but you have to remember that this is for you to gain experience, and it's going to be difficult right now, but it's going to help you down the line, right? So figure out how much time you have available. So when you do apply, you can be transparent. I have 5 hours a week. I have 10 hours a week. Maybe you're in a situation where you can volunteer that much time. And be very clear and honest with yourself about whether you have the time to do it. Because if you do it and you don't have the time and you leave a negative impression, then that is going to affect the letter of recommendation that you get, if you get a letter of recommendation. Now, there are some paid positions, right? You want to look into work study positions. You want to look into different types of programs and see if they have some type of program to fund first generation, lower income students, students of color, women, depending on your field, right? There are programs that support students in need. Look into your university, ask your counselor, and even if your counselor says there aren't any programs, sometimes they don't know. So sometimes faculty don't know. So keep looking, keep searching, keep asking, and asking for these opportunities. So even if you're AB 540, if you're undocumented, there are opportunities I've seen. The thing is, you have to search for them, right? So don't just give up on research if that's really your goal. You really are going to have to dig for them and search them. And even if you can't find a paid position, maybe you make that sacrifice for your long-term passion and goal, right? So think about that. So now let's really move on to applying to different positions and the steps to doing that. Right, so this is a question I often get from students. They come in and they're like, okay, well, how do I get in a lab? How do I get research experience? So one way you can do it is you can look for programs that exist on your campus that are designed to help students get into PhD programs. So these programs are often geared to low-income students, first-generation students, underrepresented students, and they have applications usually each year, and they have a format set up to guide you towards a PhD degree, including matching you up with a mentor, right? So you want to look into those programs and see, are there programs, do I qualify for those programs? And that's one way to get that experience in research. Now, the more traditional approach is to look up faculty on the department website, right? So the way you do that is, well, first go figure out how to get to your department website. In my case, you could just Google CSUN psychology. And then what's here, you want to look for a tab or a link somewhere that says faculty or employees or something like that. Usually it's going to say faculty, but keep in mind when you click on it, you're going to see different type of employees in your department. You're going to see faculty, you're going to see part-time faculty. Oftentimes they have different names for the part-time faculty. Sometimes they're called lecturers, sometimes they're called adjunct faculty, so keep that in mind. Oftentimes these are the best teachers in the department, but you are trying to look for the full-time faculty because most oftentimes they have an active research lab. They're actively doing research. They have a research agenda. Not always the case, but in general, that's the case, right? So you want to make sure you focus on the full-time faculty, unless you know a part-time faculty that has an active research lab or research agenda on campus. So look through their profile, see what kind of work they're doing. They should have some recent publications. See how recent the publication is, see if they have active research going on, and then look at the focus of the most recent article, right? What kind of work are they doing? Is it in line with your interest? Now, when you find faculty, make me a list of 3 or 5 faculty you're interested in working with at your university. Then you want to look up some of their readings, some of the most recent articles, right? The nice thing about peer-reviewed journal articles is that oftentimes they have an abstract, and you can read the abstract, and that'll give you a good idea of what the article is about. Now, they're not expecting you to know everything, but when you reach out to them, you should know something about their work, right? So at least read the abstract from 3 or 5 articles before you reach out to them. So at this point, you should have about 3 or 5 faculty members on your list, right? Before you contact them, again, you want to read through their work, skim it, read the abstracts. If they have books and chapters and that's what your field looks like, instead of looking at abstracts, see if you could get a general sense for the work they do. See if you can find some summaries, some reviews of those books, so you could get an idea of the work they're doing, right? And then you want to reach out to them. Now, keep in mind, for this list, you can include faculty from other departments if they relate to your field. So psychology, you want to look into sociology, anthropology, ethnic studies, right? Education. It depends on your interest, right? Research experience is helpful as long as it's in line with what you want to do. If you want to go into social psychology and look at bullying in high school settings, going into your developmental department, education department, that would all help you when applying to PhD programs in that area, right? So keep that in mind. Now, you've read their work, you're going to reach out to them. When you reach out to them, you want to show them that you're familiar with their work. So you want to say something like, "Hi, Dr. R. I'm very interested in your work on looking at race, gender, and digital media. I can relate to the work, and I'm really interested in how this relates to developmental psychology. How do children experience gender when playing with games? I've noticed that many of the games my nephews play, they're very girly or very geared towards boys. So they seem to reinforce gender dynamics." I don't know, right? But you're just kind of showing that you're interested, showing that you know the person's work, and then you follow up with saying something like, "I have about 5 hours a week available to dedicate to research. I guarantee you that I can dedicate this time, and I'm willing to commit for a year," right? So you want to show them that you have that dedication. You want to show them that you're very interested in working with them, that you know their work, and that you're willing to set aside time for doing this. And then you want to end with something like, I'm very interested in working in your research lab. Would you happen to have any undergraduate positions open? Do you have any graduate students who need assistance with any of their projects? So oftentimes it's their graduate students you'll be working with, right? So you'd end there, sign off sincerely, Omar, and you'd wait. Now, keep in mind, this is one approach, but if on their profile page, right? So when you go to the faculty page, on their profile, if they say there, this is how to apply to my lab. If they have a website linked on their profile and it says, this is how you apply to my lab, reach out to my lab coordinator, and then we'll get back to you. You want to make sure you follow that before emailing, because a pet peeve of some faculty is you didn't follow the instructions. And that's kind of a test. You don't pass that test, you don't get in, right? So if they say, email me and use the words blue, green, and yellow in your heading, then make sure you do that, because sometimes faculty will have this test. Can you follow directions? Is it clear to me that you've read thoroughly the directions I already have out there? And I might just get annoyed, right? Come on, like, I've put this out there, I put this time into making it clear to students how to apply, and people keep, it might not be you, it's just that people keep emailing me this question. I've made it very clear I'm annoyed or I'm very busy. Maybe they're not annoyed. Maybe they're just very busy and don't have time to get back to you, and they've made it this way so your application is more likely to get through, right? So if they have clear directions on how to apply on their profile page or their website, do that first. So let's say you applied to their website, or you sent an email, right? So they don't have any directions on their website, so you sent an email instead, and it's been 2 weeks. You haven't heard back. It's time, it's ticking, you're impatient, you feel like your life is passing before your eyes, oftentimes students feel like this urgency, like I need to get experience now, right? Be patient. Oftentimes you don't get a response, not necessarily because they're saying no, they might just not have a position. So that might be a no, but it's not because of you, it's because they don't have any positions open. Or most likely, they just missed your application. Sometimes this will happen to me. I'll see an email from someone, and I want to respond to it. I'm like, I'll get back to that later, and I just forget. There's no malintention intended. It doesn't mean no, I just forgot. I'm just so busy, I forgot. So after 2 weeks, send an email. Hi, Dr. R. I was wondering if you've had a chance to review my application. I'm looking forward to hearing back from you. Thank you. Keep it short. And another key thing to keep in mind, keep the subject heading very clear. So here, checking in on my RA application or research assistant application. When you send the email initially, if you had to send an email instead of applying through their website or however they mentioned to apply, RA application, research assistant application. Make it very clear so they know what this email is about. So there's no vagueness. But then also keep in mind how I describe that email, to the point. You don't want to sound entitled. So be very careful with your wording. I emailed 2 weeks ago and I haven't heard back yet. You might be annoyed, but if you're annoyed in this email, it's my lab. I don't want to work with somebody that's going to show me attitude, who's going to be rude to me, who's going to be rude to the other students in my lab, because I also want to make sure they have a good working environment. So be polite, be patient. Now, if you send that second email or that email after applying and you don't hear back 2 weeks later, then you kind of want to back off, continue applying to different labs, right? So keep it in mind that you want to look into different labs. You might have 2 applications going at the same time, and that's fine. Just be ready to tell that other person who reaches out to you later, let's say they actually have an opportunity, you can respond, you should still respond. Oh, thank you for responding. Unfortunately, I'm already involved in the lab. So hopefully that was helpful. I know I haven't gone over all the details. There's so much variation, there's so much to go over. But good luck with looking for a lab. Make sure to keep trying. Don't come across as entitled. Be patient. Don't freak out. But definitely be persistent. If you can't find an opportunity in your department, look in other related departments, right? And hopefully you're able to find an opportunity. Make sure you dedicate yourself to this opportunity. If you get into a lab especially, you want to make sure you don't waste the opportunity. It's very difficult to get into a research lab sometimes. And if you get in, but you're not showing up, it's not going to work out, right? It's going to be a waste of time for you and for them. So you want to make sure you're showing up and you're taking initiative to do good work in that lab. So good luck, and I'll end here. Let me know if you have any questions below.